The 22 billion black hole in the UK's public finances is largely made up of public sector pay awards, the spiralling cost of dealing with asylum seekers, unfunded rail projects, and an unusual use of Treasury reserves. In this video, I'd like to take a closer look at all that. The newly elected Labour government has been quick to point to a £22 billion black hole in the UK's economy. But what are the real causes of this fiscal gap? Let's break it down, and critically, let's see how Labour is complicit in both its creation and continuation. Here is where the majority of that money, upwards of £9 billion, can be accounted for. Labour has caved in to multiple demands for public sector pay rises across the board. NHS workers, teachers, civil servants, rail workers, they've all received significant pay increases amounting to an additional £9 billion. Now, while pay rises may sound justifiable after years of wage stagnation, what's missing here? It's any demand for increased productivity. We've seen no meaningful reforms or efficiency improvements linked to these increases, making this a pure cost burden on the taxpayer. £3 billion and rising goes on the small boats crisis. Labour's plan is to move asylum seekers out of hotels and into so-called dispersal accommodation, which is a newly contrived term for private rented property, and other sites like disused army barracks and similar buildings. And we have to ask the question as to whether councils are now eyeing up some guaranteed rent here. These surface changes are being presented to the public as cost-saving measures. But let's be clear, this approach risks massively reducing the availability of rental housing for UK citizens, pushing rents even higher in an already overheated market. The impact of this plan on ordinary families could be severe, with the added pressure on the rental market making life harder for people across the UK. And then there's the rail fiasco. Labour has scrapped almost every rail project promised in the wake of HS2's cancellation, reconsidering them under the umbrella of their rail renationalisation project, Great British Railways. But history should remind us what happens when the government runs the railways. British Rail, when it was in public hands, was plagued by underinvestment, inefficiency and strikes. There's little reason to believe that Great British Railways will fare any better, and the likely cost could dwarf the £1.6 billion they claim is currently unfunded in rail projects. While the decision to use the Treasury reserve to fund projects like supporting the Northern Ireland Executive and public inquiries like COVID-19 and the Post Office is a curious one, it's not the biggest contributor to this black hole. These costs, though unusual, are far outweighed by the rest and are arguably the only costs they were unaware of. So what do independent economists make of Labour's claimed shock and surprise? Even the Institute for Fiscal Studies has argued that much of this financial shortfall was predictable. These are pressures the government should have anticipated, including rising costs in health, rail and asylum services. But Labour is swinging this black hole story around like an economic wrecking ball, using it to justify what they're calling tough decisions, whilst at the same time avoiding any deeper scrutiny. So what should working people make of all this? The real question is, how long can Labour run with this story of rising costs and no demands for reform? They've been quick to blame the previous government for the £22 billion black hole, but now that they're in charge, it's time for them to take the responsibility. This isn't just about numbers on a balance sheet. This is about the financial future of the country. The wrecking ball is aimed directly at our heads. If you agree with me, then please share this video and follow me on X.